The last name doesn't match. In the ship's registration, it's written one way. In the census a few years later, it became another. The handwriting changes, letters disappear, new consonants appear. It seems like a mistake, but when this is repeated in thousands of families, it ceases to seem like an isolated accident. Those who research family trees find this all the time. The same person, the same address, the same age, and a different last name. At the time of registration, almost nothing was confirmed letter by letter. Much of the note-taking was done by listening. The immigrant spoke with a heavy accent, tired from the journey, nervous. The officer wrote quickly. Paper, cue, pressure, noise. If the sound resembled Tanov, it became Tanov, Tanov, Donov. It depended on the ear of whoever was holding the pen. That version entered the system, and that was it. It became a legal identity. Nobody stopped the process to discuss spelling. There's also the clash between alphabets. Some of these names came from writing systems that don't even use the same letters you're seeing now. Converting sound to another writing system was never exact. A single phoneme could generate several acceptable spellings. Two different registry offices recorded the same surname in two different ways without considering there a conflict. For them, it was the same family. For those researching today, it seems like a lineage break. In many cases, the change wasn't a mistake, it was a choice, a name that was too long, difficult to pronounce, an easy target for jokes or rejection. The family itself would cut pieces, change the ending, adapt the sound. Sometimes they would translate the meaning. It was a practical strategy to facilitate job interviews, contracts, and children's school enrollment. Integration also involved listening. If the name hindered the conversation, it was adjusted. The effect of this is appearing now, decades later. People are searching for ancestors and thinking the line has disappeared. It hasn't disappeared, it's just hidden behind a different spelling. Those who work with genealogy expect this and test variations in sound, not just letters. They say the surname aloud and try to write it as another person would hear it. Many doors open this way. If this type of discrepancy has already appeared in your family research, comment on the variation you found. There's another detail that almost no one considers. Many people didn't know how to spell their own surname the same way every time. They signed however they could. In old documents, you can see the variation in the same hand, in the same person. An extra letter here, another one changed there. The clerk copied that, or interpreted it, and the copied version gained more weight than the original signature. The official document always wins. In school records, this becomes even more evident. The child would arrive with a name spoken at home. The teacher would write it down in the simplest way possible for them. That form would become the basis for other documents. When they checked, the child already had a different spelling than the one used by the father, not because someone ordered a change, because no one stopped to standardize it. Old censuses weren't helpful either. Enumerators would go door to door, noting down quick, sometimes summarized answers. If they didn't understand, they'd adapt. If they found it complicated, they'd simplify. The goal was to count people, not to preserve familial spellings. Surnames became functional, not sacred. 20, 30 years pass. The new form is already in the contract, the certificate, the military record. Going back is difficult. Almost no one goes back. The adapted version becomes official once and for all. If you're researching and get stuck on a surname that disappears, try searching by sound, not by exact spelling. Say it aloud. Test similar spellings. That's usually when the record reappears. And there's a point that often gets overlooked. Old documents didn't match other old documents. There was no cross-referencing database, automatic verification, nothing like that. Each agency recorded it in its own way. Port, registry office, school, military service, Each one wrote as they received the information. If the spelling had already changed once, the next department copied the most recent version, and that was it. The error or the adaptation spread. In some records, you can almost see a timeline of the transformation. First, the full spelling, full of unusual consonants, then a simplified version, then another even shorter one. It's not a mandatory, abrupt replacement. It's wear and tear from use. Like a stone in a flowing stream, the name is rounded off by daily life. Another factor is the interference of local sounds. Certain languages lack some phonemes. The employee simply substituted them with the closest sound they knew. This mainly affected the endings. Entire suffixes were changed because they didn't make sense to the writer. And since the surname is usually at the end of speech, precisely the part spoken the fastest, that's where the most changes occurred. There was also the practical pressure of daily life. Imagine repeating your last name 10 times a day and no one being able to pronounce it correctly. At work, renting, delivering goods, there comes a point when the person themselves offers an easier version. It's not a loss of identity, it's an adjustment for social survival. But the official document records the adjustment, not the intention. There are naturalization records where the new spelling appears for the first time, not because the government invented it, but because the applicant themselves wrote it differently than what was on the arrival list. The person had already been using the adapted form for years. The document only formalized what was already common practice. To those who look at it today, with everything digital and standardized, it seems extremely strange. But in that context, spelling consistency wasn't an administrative priority. Identifying the person was. If you could tell who it was, that was enough. The side effect is this modern puzzle. Familiar lines that seem to start from nowhere, branches that seem not to connect. When someone finds the intermediate spelling, that transitional version, several pieces fit together at once. If you're building a family tree, never treat the first spelling as definitive. Treat it as an auditory clue. In these cases, the surname is less a fixed word and more a written echo of how someone heard it that day. And sometimes the change doesn't appear in the surname, it appears in the full name. Reversed order, middle name becoming surname, nickname taking the place of the registered name. In several old records, what the person used in daily life ended up becoming what was officially written, not by rule, by habit. The clerk would ask, "What is your name?" and write that down. The result is that the document captures the usage, not the origin. There's also the time factor. Between arrival and the first major official registration in the new country, years could pass. In that interval, the name had already undergone informal adaptations. Neighbors would say it one way, bosses another, the church would register it yet another way. By the time it finally appeared on a more formal state document, that form was already the most widely known. The old version was unceremoniously left behind. Some surnames have practically vanished because they've been absorbed by local equivalents. It's not a perfect translation, it's an approximation. A similar meaning, a similar sound, something that works. For those who made the switch, it solved an immediate problem. For those who research later, it creates a labyrinth. There are cases where only one detail saves the connection. Repeated profession, same address, children's names matching. The surname changed, but the rest reveals that it's the same family. Historical research becomes detective work, crossing weak clues until a reasonable certainty is formed. Interestingly, even within the immigrant community itself, the old form was often still used in speech. The new form remained outside the community, contratto, papel, autoridad, two versions coexisting at the same time, one social, the other administrative. When you start to see this pattern, the disappearances in the files decrease significantly. What seemed a break becomes a curve. What seemed an error becomes a process. It takes more work, requires trial and error, but usually the trail reappears, just not with the spelling you expected. If you find a case like this in your family, keep all the variations, even the ones that seem absurd, especially those. There's another detail that complicates a lot the lives of those researching today. Standardization came late. For a long time, nobody demanded that the surname be written the same way everywhere. It wasn't like now, where a system crashes if the letters don't match. Before, if it sounded similar, it was acceptable. This gives enormous freedom for variation and a huge headache later. In old religious records, for example, the priest wrote as he saw fit. In civil records, another official might write differently. If the family moved to a different neighborhood or city, the spelling could change along with them. Not because someone wanted to alter it, because no one felt it was necessary to preserve the exact form. Identity was the person, not the spelling. There are situations where the change only becomes apparent when the signature becomes printed. While it was a cursive signature, it was possible to hide differences. When it started being written in block letters on forms, someone had to decide how it should actually be written. The decision of a single employee could become the definitive version for all subsequent generations. And there's the shame factor too, rarely discussed but real. Some families had surnames associated with discriminated groups, looked down regions, or recent conflicts. Some preferred to change their names to avoid headaches. They didn't leave a letter explaining the change, they just did it. The paper recorded the new name, and life went on. Therefore, when someone says that a surname has disappeared, it almost never truly disappeared. It slipped in form. It was shaped by listening, haste, adaptation, convenience, and social context. The lineage continued to move forward, it just changed the sign on the door. If you're researching, the best tool isn't just the search engine, it's flexibility. Trying to misspell words on purpose, changing endings, cutting syllables, lengthening sounds, thinking about how someone would hear that name in a noisy environment and write it down without thinking twice. When the right variation appears, you feel it instantly. Dates match, relatives coincide, places align. History begins to make sense again, even with the different last name. If you've made it this far, comment with the spelling furthest from the original that you've ever found. We've reached the end.